Hello and welcome to the video about Coolham Airfield, one of many advanced landing grounds constructed especially for D-Day. 80 years ago, on the 6th of June 1944, the largest air, land and sea invasion in history took place on the beaches of Normandy, France. The Allied forces were to liberate France and progress east to liberate the rest of Europe from German occupation and lead to the victory in Europe in May 1945. Preparations for the invasion took place over 2 years previously. These included construction of decoy airfields and camps in Kent and Essex in the southeast of England. The idea was to make the Germans think that the invasion was to take place around the Pas de Calais, the closest point between Britain and France, only 26 miles. The Normandy beaches were over 145 miles away. On these decoy airfields and camps, there were decoy aircraft made out of wooden frames covered in canvas. There were inflatable tanks and other vehicles. The Germans flew regular reconnaissance flights over the south of England, and the decoys were to convince the Germans of a significant build-up of forces. Another plan that was carried out was to build extra airfields in the south of England due to the proximity of France. The role of the aircraft based at these airfields would be predominantly to support and protect the bombers, paratroopers, the ships and the troops landing on the beaches, as well as to attack the enemy positions and aircraft. This video particularly concentrates on Coolham Airfield in West Sussex. It epitomises how and why the Advanced Landing Grounds, or ALGs, were created and constructed. The reasons for each location vary, but are very similar. Over 72 sites were surveyed between June and July 1942 in the south of England. Only 23 were finally built. Some were on prime agricultural land, which led to disputes between farmers and the government, which the government then had to do compulsory purchase through Defence of the Realm Act. The decision to build at Coolham was made on the 8th of October 1942 by an Air Ministry conference held in Coolham. Its location, level ground and good rail and road connections made it ideal. 113 acres of land would be requisitioned, around 700 to 800 trees would require clearing, and 2,000 yards of high-tension electrical cable to be buried along with wiring for the telephone and telex facilities. Extra drainage had to be installed due to the level of the land. In August 1943, construction was commenced by 156 personnel from numbers 4661, 4663 flight from the 5004 Airfield Construction Squadron. The task was expected to take 10 months. Also present were a contingent from 5206 Plant Airfield Construction Squadron, plus local contractors HK were employed and a civilian and civil engineer seconded by the War Department, Mr. Ronald Coleman. Barnhouse Farm was a local POW camp, formerly a pig farm, and some airmen were billeted here during the construction. An historic house, Saucelands, was saved from demolition. However, the next door house was not, as it was on the approach to the northeast-southwest runway. Barnhill House, at the western end of the main runway, had its roof removed, making it uninhabitable, but safer for aircraft. It was, however, restored after hostilities. 2 summer-filled metal track runways were laid down, with 36 aircraft hard-standing dispersals. The main east-west runway was 1,500 yards long, and the southwest-northeast runway was 1,200 yards long. The summer-filled tracking was later replaced by a more substantial square mesh track. Air traffic control, or ATC, was from a mobile caravan, and the airfield had its ID letters of XQ, X-Ray Quebec. There were no nighttime landing aids, and sorties were monitored by 2 Group Royal Observer Corps in nearby Horsham. 4 blister hangars were erected, along with an armoury, pyrotechnic dump, defence post and fuel installation for 24,000 gallons. RAF Fire and Rescue Services were also present. The facilities for personnel included tents and marquees that were used for squadron offices, guardroom stores, motor transport buildings and canteens. Medical facilities were a mobile surgery, part of Farley's Farm next to Thacombe Road, which used as a nursing ward and administration centre. Accommodation for virtually all airmen stationed here were in tents on the airfield. Conditions were sometimes cramped, cold, wet, with some NCO airmen having to use wooden boxes on which to sleep. Bathing and toilet facilities were also extremely basic. As most of the airmen did not possess motorised vehicles, their off-duty periods were spent in the Chelsea Arms pub, or cycling to other nearby villages. By February 1944, the airfield was nearing completion. On the 15th of February 1944, there was, however, an unfortunate incident. An American twin-engined Martin B-26 Marauder, number 41-34813, of the 323rd Bombardment Group, 454th Bomb Squadron, 2nd Air Division, 9th Air Force, based at Earlscombe in Essex, made an emergency landing. The aircraft, named Flounder Gus, was piloted by First Lieutenant Richard Lightfine. They were returning from a raid on the V-1 flying bomb launch sites around Cherbourg. Official reports state it landed at Farley's Farm at 1100 hours, on the edge of the field, but was completely wrecked. This was the first aircraft to land at Coolham. The report also states that one engine was dead, and when it was about to land, the second engine cut, making the machine uncontrollable. The undercarriage was retracted, and the pilot saw the men working on the airfield and tried to miss them. However, a Sergeant Charles Gordon of the 5018 Airfield Construction Squadron, he was struck on the head by a piece of the wing and unfortunately died from his injuries. He was the first person to die at Coolham. The tail gun of the aircraft broke away, flipped and landed in the back garden of a local house. The lady owner offered the rear gunner a cup of tea as he was still strapped in his seat. He was later treated for shock when taken to hospital for a checkup. The crew of the aircraft all survived. They were sent to hospital as a precaution, and then the crew made their way back to Earlscombe. The aircraft, however, was written off. The pilot named the aircraft Flounder Gus, as it was named after his Great Dane puppy. The Americans, however, also became the last organisation to land an aircraft at wartime Coolham in January 1945. The four-engine consolidated B-24 Liberator, somewhat larger than the Marauder, was returning from a bombing raid on Dresden on 19th January 1945. It was attached to the 491st Bomb Group, 855th Squadron, 2nd Air Division, based at North Pickenham in Norfolk. It was named Mad Madeline. The aircraft experienced turbocharger problems after bomb release. They therefore had to drop out of formation and reduce speed back home. Bad weather, including snow, strong winds and cold fronts, added to the issues and forced them on a more southerly route than normal to get back to East Anglia. Overcast cloud cover made it almost impossible to tell if they were over land, and they were also running low on fuel. They attempted to call the aviation emergency frequency, but got no response. They navigated by dead reckoning, one Mercator chart, and the RAF G-box that had been installed in the aircraft. Through a break in the cloud, they dropped below the 400-foot cloud ceiling, and they came upon Coolham and the north-east-southwest runway. They dropped the undercarriage and flaps, and they carried out a go-around. On landing, the aircraft veered off the metal strip and into the mud, which helped slow it to a stop. The mud came as high as the 5th caliber machine guns. Fortunately, there were no injuries. The crew, however, were accosted by a group of inquisitive schoolchildren. The runway was by no means long enough for this aircraft to get airborne loaded with guns and fuel. The largest airfield, large enough to take this aircraft, was RAF Dunsfold, run by the Canadians, a 10-minute flight away. The authorities understandably wanted the aircraft back, and so the aircraft was lightened by any unnecessary items being removed. This took 8 days to get the aircraft ready for its ferry flight to Dunsfold, where it would be reassembled. The unpacked items were sent by truck. It was then flown back to Norfolk. Coolham itself became home to personnel from Poland, Britain, the Commonwealth and Belgium. The majority of the squadrons based here were operating the North American P-51B and C Mustangs. These initially had Allison engines and non-sliding canopies. The pilots had initially been trained on Spitfires or other types, but now had to cross-train onto the Mustang. The Mustang's engines were upgraded to the Rolls-Royce Merlin, licence built by the American Packard Company, then became known as the Packard Merlins, which gave it the more legendary performance it is known for. The canopy was also upgraded to the bubble sliding type. A lasting legacy of the Second World War, and Coolham Airfield, is the Royal Belgian Air Force Squadron. It's the number 346 Squadron, Royal Air Force. It was reformed in 1943, having been formed in Africa in 1942, using Curtiss Tomahawks. At Coolham and other places in the UK, it used Spitfires. Today, as part of the Royal Belgian Air Force, it retains its RAF squadron number and flies F-16 Falcons. In the UK, it started off at RAF Wittering before moving south in 1944, when it was based at Friston, then Selsey, then Coolham, before going to mainland Europe. Coolham officially opened as an airfield in April 1944, just before D-Day, as was intended. Today it is farmland. The main runway, east-west, is a field split into about 3 fields. The north-east-south-west runway is similar. An aerial view gives the better layout. There are a number of squadrons based at Coolham from Poland, UK, Commonwealth and Belgium. The Polish squadrons, 306, 315, 411 and 5090 Mobile Signal Unit. The Royal Air Force, 129 Mysore, 222 Natal, 349 Belgium, 485 New Zealand. The Airfield Construction Squadrons, 5003, 5004, 5018, 5027, 5206. RAF Regiment, 2722, 2829. RAF Ordnance Unit, the 422 Aviation Fuel and Ammunition Park. RAF Maintenance Unit, 49 MU at Faygate, and the numbers 133 and 135 wings of the 84th Group Tactical Air Force. In total, 15 men connected to Coolham lost their lives. They are commemorated on the memorial in Coolham village, next to the Selsey Arms pub, and by 15 oak trees planted along the perimeter of the east-west runway. There is a circular route around much of the old airfield, and the link is in the description below.